เราถัดไปเดี๋ยวเราจะมาต่อเนื่องกันในเซสชันนะคะที่จะมาพูดถึงเรื่องของ Cloud Chaos กันบ้างนะคะ Okay, so here at the tech stage, we will continue to the next interesting session that our speakers are going to talk in the topic of cloud chaos, unveiling the anatomy of the multi-vector extortion attack and data exfiltration. So now here we have a representative from Coupa Software. Would like to invite Mr. Rahul Bhor, Senior Security Engineer, and Mr. Omkar Joshi, the Lead Security Engineer, Software, to the stage. Please give them a big round of applause. เชิญค่ะ Welcome. ขอเสียงปรบมือด้วยนะคะ
Well, we have only 25 minutes, so probably I'll not much waste time, and I'll straight away talk about the topic which we are going to present, and it is all about a bit of technical in terms of the offensive side, but yes, the topic name is Unveiling the, sorry, I forgot, I have the remote. Yeah, Unveiling the anatomy of multi-vector extortion and data exfiltration. Of course, it's all about how the hackers are intruding into the environment and how they are exfiltrating the data and how the campaign actually runs. So we are going to talk about that, and let me go to the next slide with the agenda. As usual, we talk about the agenda when we give a brief context on what we are going to talk about. So the first thing is, of course, we are going to give an introduction, that is who we are, and then we will deep dive into the actual topic, which is about the cloud security landscape, because this topic is almost covering how the attackers actually gain the access to the cloud environment, and they have done the data exfiltration. So now imagine there was a campaign which happened recently. There was total around 110K of the domains. They were hosting the environment variables. So there were total of 90,000 unique environment variable was hosted on the web application, which was unsecured web application, and out of it 7,000 of the organizations are affected to that. So you can imagine that how the large scale attack this happened and how they have exfiltrated the data from the 7,000 organizations. So this is all about the agenda which we are going to talk about, and without wasting much time, I'll just give my introduction and my colleague here. So myself, I am offensive security lead, so I'll lead the offensive security team, and we do a lot of red team simulations and all. And of course, I love to break the things in AI as well. So it's all of a lot of organizations in the world is moving towards the AI, LLMs, a lot of things. So if you're using the AI, of course, I know we need to be cautious about how we are using and how they are using your data. And I have my colleague Rahul, who is also working on the security engineering and the threat management. Probably you can give your introduction if you want to, and then yeah. So let's now deep dive into the topic. So how many are you from a security background? Of course I can see, but anyway, how many of you from security background? Nobody? Okay, only 2 people out of the 30 people? Okay, so let's talk about cloud security. Are you from a cloud company? Anybody is using a cloud, or they are still on premises or data centers? Any cloud specific you are using? AWS, Azure, GCP, Oracle, anything? Okay, not a problem. So now when we talk about cloud security landscape, right? When we talk about security, there are many things comes into the picture. It's not about only people, it's not about only process, it's not only about the technology. It's all about adoption as well. So when we talk about adopting, it's always a difficult choice to make, because we have a traditional systems. When we talk about OT, ICS, SCADA, we have a lot of things which are very old things which are there still in the production, and if you want to adopt such kind of security controls, upgrading the version, it makes pretty difficult to do that. So adoption is always required. So now when we deep dive into the cloud security, now we talk about multi-cloud. So a lot of organizations are using AWS, they are using the GCP, they are using the Azure, right? So when we talk about the organization specific, we do have multi-cloud environments as well. Like a couple of organizations do they utilize AWS, Azure. So that comes with the integration, that comes with the peering, the systems, and a lot of things. So the security posture of any cloud environment, it's not only a responsibility of the product which offering the CSPM. It is responsibility of the people who are into the environment and organizations. That is where the actual attack happens. Zero trust, oh my God. What exactly the zero trust is? You need to trust or you don't need to trust. The main thing is trust but verify. What does that mean is you have to make sure whatever you are actually utilizing, that is you're verifying your users, your products which you are integrating, the technology you are outsourcing or maybe you are adopting. So you have to verify when it comes to authentication and authorization, accountability, right? So that we always talks about, hey, we are implementing zero trust, zero trust. It's not only the framework, it's all about adopting the process and spreading it across. Native security. So the cloud native, when we talk about just now one of the speaker talked about the security shifting left, security in DevOps, right? So when you talk about shift left approach, it is again the adoption. So security champions program we have a lot of things in place where we need to avail that whether our DevOps pipeline is actually secure enough, hardened enough, because we need to make sure this a lot of things we are developing that should not go into the production without the proper checks. So we have a lot of things. OWASP has a separate baseline. We have a SANS. A lot of things is there. So that is all about secure native security. When we talk about access control is not only the on-premises. It's all about now cloud environments. We talk about access controls in terms of the NACL like NACL. We talk about security groups. We talk about a lot of things like perimeter security. If you are exposing something, we need to make sure there are proper access controls are in place. And of course, cloud security posture management, a lot of companies are offering as well the cloud security posture management. So how do you actually, even though my question is to of course all of you as well, does the CSPM is only the way a solution to avoid such kind of exfiltration attacks? No. And how? That we are going to deep dive into that. So we'll talk about some of the implications and attack surface and attack vectors. Now we are adopting the cloud. We have a lot of, again, challenges as well in terms of the security. Of course, misconfigurations. It's not only it's a shared responsibility model. When we talk about the cloud, it's a shared responsibility. So it's not the one like AWS, Azure, GCP's responsibility. It's our responsibility to make sure that we are configuring it in a right way, in a secure manner. So the misconfiguration, the biggest challenge, and we have seen that, and we have also tried to do the data exfiltration by using the misconfiguration. Next thing is DDoS protection. Of course, a lot of cloud providers offers. We have Cloudflare as well. We have a lot of things are there. So the DDoS is, of course, when we talk about DDoS protection, it is again one more challenge in the industry. And insecure APIs, insecure web applications. So when we talk about entry point, so entry point is not only your systems, like if publicly, the main thing is the application which are publicly hosted. These are the main entry points when we talk about. If it is itself is vulnerable, so how that can be leveraged to gain access to the environment which is behind that. That is the insecure way of implementing and developing the applications as APIs. And of course, vectors are a lot of things. You can do a phishing, spear phishing, social engineering. That's what we talk about. You can deploy a malware. If there are unpatched softwares or a lot of things, then yes, vulnerable version is always a problematic and always a one threat to the organization because you have the supply chain, right? So one to many. When you talk about supply chain, if you are compromising one, you are getting it all for free because you are compromising one package which is going to be used by a lot of organizations and you are getting those free in your hand. So how many of you heard about Palo Alto Unit 42? It's one of the great team which I have seen. Of course, I have a few friends as well. So what they did is they have done the research on a couple of things, and you can see is this thing. So this is the research. So there are a lot of web applications. As I mentioned, around 7,000 organizations have hosted environment variables on the website, and how the environment variables are used to gain the access to the cloud environment. This was specifically the AWS, and they did the data exfiltration. So this is a typical, attack flow. MITRE attack framework. Anybody heard about it? Yes. It is one of the famous framework which talks about tactics, techniques, and procedures. You can, talk about a lot of things. You can actually relate your attack strategies, offensive side, defensive also, like blue teaming, red teamers. They use that to make sure, okay, you are aligning with this framework, and there are some APTs, advanced persistence threats. These are inactive in the wild, and you have that information on MITRE attack framework. So what the attack actually happened is, we have started with the initial access. Of course, that is the main thing where you actually entered into the environment by doing some reconnaissance. That is the tactic TH001. Then we started with the discovery. When we talk about discovery is nothing but if you are in an environment, so you have to discover, or you have to do a service discovery, possibly vulnerable endpoints, vulnerable services, whether you can extract something and then you can gain access internally, then do a lateral movements, anything possible that. So that is what we discovery talk about. Privilege escalation. Yes, you gain access to the environment, but you never know, you have a very limited privileges or limited permissions. When you talk about cloud, you have a IAM role, IAM users. So if your IAM role itself has a very limited permissions or policies attached, AWS manager policies. So of course you need to be ready for do a escalation to a higher privileges. Maybe you can try to create an administrative access policy. That is what we did. As you can see in the screenshot, this was something which is administrator policy, administrator access policy, and that is what the caller identity. This is a AWS API call which actually talks about, gain the information about what is the exactly, IAM user is, their information, the account number. So it will give, fetch you all the information by using this get caller identity. This is AWS. We are going to talk about all the AWS environment which was used by 7,000 organizations. So yes, so access is, when you talk about environment files, those are the access keys where your, all the metadata. You have heard about metadata, AWS metadata, which is where your actual security credentials are stored. So that is where environment variable comes, where your security credentials are stored. So what is the research is all about? You fetch the environment variables from the web application, and we are able to actually leverage that to gain the access into the environment. That was the initial access. And you can see this, of course, /web application /.env. That was the vulnerable endpoint. And discovery, when you talk about discovery, okay, once you are in, how we can leverage that to get more access to the services. So there are a couple of services we talk about. Simple storage. When you talk about data exfiltration in AWS or any cloud storage, we talk about relational database, or we talk about simple storage, right? So in terms of AWS, we focused on the S3, simple storage service, and we focused on the SES, that is email service. Why email service? Because that is where you are actually doing a phishing campaign internally. When you are in, so SES is actually a trusted source, right? So Amazon SES or maybe simple email service, you basically try to do a phishing emails, which actually looks like, okay, the users will see this is a legitimate source because we are inside, we are doing the inside phishing campaign using the SES of this trusted organization. So that will be a very legitimate call, and that was actually happened. And of course, privilege escalation, what we have observed is we had access to the IAM role, which was gained by the environment variable. We leveraged that with the configuring the CLI, and then what we did is we created the new role with the API call of the creating role, and then we attached the policy of administrator access. What does that mean? You are actually leveraging the API call of create role, and you are creating the administrator IAM role, administrator policy user. That is what is done using this. And then now, this is not the just end, because we need to do a lot of things to exfiltrate the data. Because in traditional approach, what used to happen is attackers used to install a ransomware, they do the encryption, done. But this is moreover you actually exfiltrate the data first. So we copy the data, AWS copy, S3 copy, and S3 sync, and then you put a ransom note about, oh, this is something, your data is it's in our hands, and then you have to pay this kind of ransom. So it's all about new way of attacking the things, and putting the users as a tricky. So with that, the execution, the next thing is execution, where we want to move it laterally. So we tried with the creating a EC2 creation, we tried with the security group creation, but it actually failed. When we talk about anything, it's not always a success. It's like a lot of failures, then you actually talk about success. So we actually failed to create EC2, we actually failed to with the security groups. But then one of my colleague will come and he will talk about how we created a Lambda function, and then we exfiltrate the data using the S3. Rahul, over to you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Omkar. So when we look at the Lambda functions which the threat actor created, it's not a simple Lambda function, but rather it has various bash scripts embedded into it. So looking at the first bash scripts, we can see that they are using pre-configured lists, which includes domains and IP addresses, which they will be enumerating against possible environment files, right? After that, the Lambda functions evaluates those particular domains and IP addresses if they have environment files. If they have environment files, then the script will further get the plain text credentials, right? And after that, from the previously discovered data, we also the researchers also got mailgun credentials, which could be used to launch the large-scale phishing campaigns, right? Next, we could see that the attackers have used S3 browser tool for downloading the data, viewing the data, and also performing some other operations on that. And when we use the S3 browser tool, these are some of the S3 APIs that get executed in the backend. So that is one way we could check from the CloudTrail logs and from the CloudTrail events that an S3 browser tool is being used here. This is a sample CloudTrail events in which, when we look at the second piece of the JSON code, we see here the S3 browser is being used, and it is calling the host, which is testbucket.com, followed by the generic Amazon AWS URI. And another way to detect an exfiltration would be looking at the monthly AWS cost and usage reports. So this is especially useful when we do not have any object level logging enabled on our S3 buckets. So here you can see the data transfer out has cost $729 for the month of July 2024, which is, I could say, quite high considering the amount of data that is going out. Because typically when we talk about a cloud environment, there having such amount of data transfer out is usually considered as suspicious, but there are some exceptions in which we can see this kind of data transfer. Moving on to the impact, which is the the final, I could say, stage in this data exfiltration process. The threat actors, they sent out an email to the compromised accounts saying that your particular data has been extorted and it is available for sale. Now, generally at this point of stage, organizations, or we could say the victims, are coerced into giving such kind of data, and they end up paying ransom without a guarantee that they will ever get their data back. Now, moving on to assessing the impact leak, we see here from some of the data that was retrieved as part of the reverse engineering attempt, we could see some important parameters here, like the database names, database users, database passwords, along with the mail credentials, and also we can see AWS access keys ID. Now, these are some of the important credentials that a particular organization will have. And next, we'll look at how we look at steps which will ensure that such an exfiltration attempt is not happening again. So these are some of the unique AWS access keys and GitHub keys that were exposed as part of the leak. And these are the IOCs which have been associated with the data exfiltration attempt, right? And this is some of the measures which we can leverage on when we are building a robust and a secure cloud infrastructure. So one of the takeaways that we can have from this extortion attack is principle of least privileges. As almost all of the cloud providers, they educate is that you should always use the principle of least privileges. What does that mean? It means that a particular access key or a role should only have the privileges that are required. So as my colleague showcased before, there was an administrator user here which had a very broad level access of the entire organizations. Now that is something which we should not be doing. Instead, we should be looking at the principle of least privileges, which will ensure that only certain access is given to a particular user or to a particular role. Next is network flow logs. Now, this is something which is in some organizations that we have seen, we see that there are network flow logs in place, but in some organizations, this is done only at a certain levels. So what network flow logs is basically, network flow logs, it's a collection of data which has details about your traffic that is flowing into your VPC. So this traffic, it includes your source IP addresses, destination IP addresses, source port, destination ports, and the number of bytes or the number of data that is transferred between a given source and destination. This, by analyzing these logs, we get some critical information, like how much type of, what amount of data has been flown from a source to a destination. So in terms of data exfiltration, we'll see that there is generally a higher data transfer out, which is unusual, right? So that is one way to point out that something suspicious is happening in an environment. Next is cloud security posture management. Now, cloud security posture management will help you with different alerting mechanisms, and also they will have certain parameters which will help with data exfiltration attempts and also data tampering attempts. Next is focusing of ephemeral authentication. Now, anyone here knows what ephemeral authentication or static authentication is about? Any guesses? Okay, so when we talk about static authentication, that generally means that using of static credentials in an AWS environment or any cloud environment or any on-prem environment for that matter. So when we say static credentials, these are nothing but these are your AWS or these are your access keys or passwords which never expire. Now this lead to eventually when these passwords or these credentials, if they are not stored properly, this will lead to a leakage of those credentials. And to prevent that, we would generally recommend going with ephemeral authentication, which means having an ephemeral authentication means having temporary credentials in place. Now, temporary credentials are nothing but short-lived credentials, or we could say credentials which get expired after some time. A good example of that would be using of IAM roles. So IAM roles, they generally have a validity of an hour or 2 hours, but we can always configure them for a custom timeline, right? So with that, we would like to mention the Palo Alto Unit 42 research team and MITRE ATT&CK framework for this research. And that's it for this topic. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much once again. To have a short break for this afternoon, and we are going to once again display the QR code for this conference survey, and we'd like to request all of your feedback that we can improve to for our next event in the future. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time. สำหรับในเซสชันนะคะเมื่อสักครู่นี้ที่เราได้รับฟังกันไปนะคะก็ถือว่าเป็นอีกหนึ่งหัวข้อที่เราได้มาพูดถึงเรื่องของการเปิดเผยกลไกการโจมตีนะคะแบบเรียกค่าถ่ายหลายเวกเตอร์ค่ะแล้วก็การลักลอบนำข้อมูลออกนะคะซึ่งก็จะมีการกล่าวแล้วก็พูดถึงเรื่องของการโจมตีในระบบคลาวด์ที่ใช้กลยุทธ์หลากหลายในการขู่กันโชคแล้วก็มีการขโมยข้อมูลนะคะเราจะเห็นว่าในcase study ต่างๆนะคะที่ได้มีการนำเสนอว่ามีเทคนิคการโจมตีรูปแบบใหม่ๆมีแนวโน้มนะคะของการโจมตีที่เกิดขึ้นนะคะทั่วโลกว่ามีอะไรบ้างรวมไปถึงแล้วก็จะเป็นการอธิบายนะคะพูดถึงโซลูชันนะที่จะเข้ามาป้องกันนะคะแบบหลากหลายขั้นหรือว่า defense in depth ค่ะแล้วก็มีการนำเอาเรื่องของการวิเคราะห์การโจมตีนะคะโดยใช้วิธีนะคะหรือว่าใช้กรอบเฟรมเวิร์กนะคะของ MITRE ATT&CK framework นะคะนี่ก็จะช่วยในเรื่องของการรวบรวมจัดหมวดหมู่กลยุทธ์เทคนิคต่างๆนะคะแล้วก็กระบวนการที่แฮกเกอร์ใช้ในการโจมตีนะเพื่อที่จะให้องค์กรเนี่ยสามารถที่จะเพิ่มนะคะในเรื่องของความปลอดภัยความเสี่ยงจากภัยคุกคามที่เกิดขึ้นได้อย่างเป็นระบบแล้วก็มีประสิทธิภาพมากขึ้นรายละเอียดเพิ่มเติมเป็นอย่างไรยังไงไปพูดคุยสอบถามนะคะกับทางด้านของสปีกเกอร์แล้วก็วิทยากรในแต่ละเซสชั่นได้เลยนะคะ